Good evening, everybody. We've got another little story to tell. Not our story, something we're reading out of a book. And we said we'd do about 6 or 7, and there might be a couple more than that, but we'll see how we go. But this one we're doing tonight, Andy's going to read it. It's called The Glow Across the Field.
I sat at the kitchen table Christmas Eve morning, staring out the window at the wide frozen field that separated our house from our neighbour, Mrs. Houston's. If only Daddy were home. This was the night he would set me on his lap and read to me about the angels that visited the shepherds on the first Christmas Eve. Then we'd look out across the field and pretend that we saw angels in every shooting star and shadowy bird, even in the faintest wisps of smoke curling up from Mrs. Houston's chimney. And we'd make believe that the cheery orange glow from her house was some shepherd's campfire. But it was 1941 and Daddy was in the army. We hadn't heard from him in weeks, and I was worried because of the news on the radio. Mother had taken work as a clerk to keep us fed and clothed. There was a sad weariness in her eyes that kept me from asking her to make divinity or gingerbread men. Instead, I tried to make the cookies myself, but they came out sad-looking too, with droopy raisin mouths and wrinkled brows. We didn't even have a Christmas tree. My older brother, Carson, who usually made a fuss over finding the perfect one, didn't seem to care. All that tough year I had looked forward to the magic of Christmas time, yet now there was only gloomy emptiness. Perhaps the war raging in Europe had scared off even the imaginary angels. Carmen, my mother called from the couch. I went to her and she handed me a $5 bill. Go to the store and buy each of us a present. She gave me a tired pat on the arm and returned to her mending. I put on my coat and mittens and took the $5 bill into my pocket. I should have been excited that Mother was treating me as a grown-up at age 11. Still, I would have preferred the excitement of unwrapping a surprise gift. I kept my mittened hand wrapped tightly around the money as I started out across the icy field toward the general store 2 miles away. The trees reached out their bare limbs to the stony sky. Mounds of snow remained at the bottom of old corn stalks. The wind whipped at my back, blowing my hair into my eyes. I started to think about what to get for Mother and Carson. Maybe they'd smile when they opened their gifts. Maybe we'd laugh and talk and sing carols. Maybe Christmas would feel like Christmas again. A rabbit darted out from one of the clumps of snow into my path. Startled, I slipped and fell to the hard-packed ground. I got up and rubbed my knee, blinking back tears. Through the trees I spied a curl of blue-grey smoke rising from Mrs. Houston's chimney. She's probably making gingerbread cookies right now. I thought, happy ones. I remembered the time when, inspired by Daddy and our Christmas ritual, I had ventured close to her house to search for campfire ashes and sheep tracks. Mrs. Houston had come out, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp brown and white checked pinafore. I froze, afraid. She'd be mad. But she had looked at me with kind eyes and invited me in for some cookies and cocoa. I'm so glad you came, she said, giving me a big hug as if she'd known me forever. Standing there looking at her house now, with a knee that felt as though it had been skinned, and nose and ears numb from the cold, I wanted nothing more than to be sitting in her warm kitchen eating Christmas cookies. Somehow it seemed that being with her would make everything cheerful again. But I had grown-up responsibilities and there wasn't time to dawdle. I hurried on. In town, people carrying wrapped packages and sacks of groceries wished each other happy holidays. I ran up the steps to the general store. It smelled of cedar and oranges. Music played from a radio on the corner. I fingered scarves and neckties, sniffed at bottles of perfume. I looked longingly at a basket of Brazil nuts. $5 would never be enough for all I wanted to buy. I dug my hand into my pocket. It was empty. The $5 bill. I checked my other pocket. Whisked off my mittens to see if it had slipped into one of them. Nothing. Panic welled inside me. Frantically, I unbuckled my coat and flung it to the floor, checked the pockets of my dress, and then turned out my coat pockets inside out. I ran around the store, checking under tables, on shelves, inside boxes, scarcely noticing the stares of the customers. Then I knocked over the basket of Brazil nuts. When the man behind the counter came over, I grabbed his arm. "My $5 bill! Have you seen it?" He shook his head, bewildered. I ran out onto the store porch and asked everyone if they'd seen my money. A couple of people shook their heads sympathetically, saying, "Sorry, kid." Others shrugged as if to say, "Tough luck." I finally went back inside the store. As the radio blared "Joy to the World," I replaced the scattered nuts. I picked up my coat and put it back on, buttoning it meticulously as if that would make up for my carelessness with the money. There was news about the war, then a song about angels singing. I needed an angel now, I thought. I wiped the tears from my eyes and slowly, methodically, began to retrace my steps home, searching for the money. The sun had started to set, muted by a cluster of clouds. Wind stung my face. I squinted at Mrs. Houston's house in the distance and rubbed my smarting knee. That's it, I realised. I must have jerked my hand out of my pocket to catch myself when I fell. I followed the rabbit's tracks as far as they were visible. I should have been more careful, I chided myself. I've ruined everything. The sunlight was fading rapidly now, the first evening star shining faintly. I had to go home. What had I been expecting? Some Christmas miracle? An angel swooping down to make Christmas happy again? No tree, no gingerbread men, and now no gifts. Obviously, God wasn't sending any angels either. I trudged home feeling as if I had lost much more than a $5 bill. I walked into the house and immediately confessed I lost the money. So ashamed I didn't care what my punishment would be. But Mother said nothing. Neither did Carson. I wish they would. Perhaps they'd given up on Christmas too. We barely spoke during dinner. After Mother and Carson had gone to their rooms, I stayed at the kitchen table alone in the dark. The distant glow from Mrs. Houston's house and the few weakly glittering stars did little to lighten the sombre mood and sombre sky. I tried to imagine a shepherd's campfire, feel the awe I always felt when Daddy told me the Christmas story, but I couldn't. Santa Claus, angels, peace on earth, they were all part of a fairy story now. I crept to bed. The next morning I rolled wearily out from under my covers and went to the kitchen. Mother was heating water to wash some sheets. Christmas is, after all, just another day, I told myself. I looked out of the window to see if the weather was all right for hanging the laundry. Bright sunshine reflected off the frost-covered field. A moving shape in the distance caught my attention, and I watched it curiously. Soon I recognised Mrs. Houston. Was she coming over here? She'd never visited our house before. "Mother, come look!" She joined me at the window, then went to open the door. "Merry Christmas," Mrs. Houston announced, setting a lumpy cloth sack on the linoleum floor. Mother started up the coffee pot and Carson took Mrs. Houston's coat. Beneath it she wore the same pinafore I remembered, the shoulders ruffled, standing up stiffly like little wings. Mrs. Houston removed 3 small packages from the bag and handed one to each of us. We stood there, speechless. Finally, Mother cleared her throat and softly said, "We don't have anything for you." "Your gift is just being here, so I have someone to give it to," Mrs. Houston replied, smiling. Suddenly our kitchen felt as warm as hers did that day I had visited. "Now open your packages, all of you, and enjoy." For Mother there was a red can of Mavis talcum powder. Carson's gift was a comb and brush set. I carefully unwrapped the colourful paper from my box and smoothed out the ribbon, prolonging the moment. At last I took out a small brown purse with a gold-coloured chain. I wouldn't lose another $5 bill, that was for sure. Mother, eyes shining, looked at our guest and declared, "Mrs. Houston, you are an angel." An angel? I turned to look at Mrs. Houston as well. Yes, she must be. How else could she have known to come this particular Christmas? How else could it seem as if a fire had just been rekindled? "Won't you stay for a while?" Mother said to Mrs. Houston. "You can help me make the divinity." Carson took the axe and went to chop down a cedar tree. I made paper chains for decoration. Jingle bells played loudly on the radio, Mother and Mrs. Houston singing along as they took turns to beat the egg whites. Christmas had come after all. I knew I would never again lose my faith in its promises of goodwill, of joyous surprises, of hope. When Dad returned home a few months later, I told him about our Christmas with Mrs. Houston. I climbed onto his lap as we gazed out across the field and shook our heads in wonder. We agreed we had spent all those years imagining angels in the sky when there had been a real one right next door.
Praise God. Bless you all. See you later.
Bye-bye.